Able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we saw the frameworks right yesterday, or before 2 3 sessions, like keyword driven, data driven, and hybrid frameworks, and how those are implemented in basic scenarios. So now we will today see about TestNG and how we can try to what to integrate our TestNG with our framework that we have created. So what is a JUnit or a TestNG? Anyone has any idea? Both are synonym, right?
TestNG, test-driven framework. Karthik.
Okay. JUnit. Hello.
No idea.
Okay. Both JUnit and TestNG are testing units actually. JUnit is actually is very famous even now. JUnit is used many ways, but TestNG is kind of a little modified version of JUnit, I would say. TestNG is actually developed based on JUnit only. Uh, so even now, when you go for unit testing, uh, JUnit is widely preferred actually. So what I mean by unit testing is like when we develop some code, right? For example, developers develop some backend code, and that backend code will retrieve some data from the database. We call that as an APIs, right? What this APIs will do, it will go and retrieve code from the database, and it will return back to the user. Right now, there might be some input condition or criteria to give to the API so that it will return some result for us. For example, let us say we don't want every data from the database. We want some selective data to be displayed to the database. Let's say I want some information about users whose age is less than 32, or I want some information about users whose email ID client is gmail.com. So there are some criteria, right? These are called input conditions. And once you give those input conditions, that APIs will return results. Will return the results, right? Now, this input condition can be anything, right? And now, as a testers developing the unit testing framework, or even developer doing that unit testing, what he has to do, he has to modify these input conditions uh, many times, and he should expect any correct or wrong value. And here only comes that boundary value analysis and those kind of things, right? He gives zero value, he gives negative, he gives positive value, and for all these values, this API should return the appropriate value. For example, if it gives negative value and all, the API should return, hey, you are giving negative value, please give correct value and all. It should not throw an error. Even the input may be null also, right? Null pointer exception we saw, right? So our API must be capable of handling many things like this. For example, I'll show you. Let's see. See, this is one of the code that we have. Here we have find all contacts. Okay. So what this particular method will do, when it is called, it will return all the contacts present in our database. But we are not just randomly finding every contact. There are some criteria, right? What is the list that contact is present? What is the segment that contact is present? What is the status of the contact? So this is an example of. I'll show its implementation also. So you can see, right, the implementation is done here. Find all contacts. So it is handling many conditions, right? It is handling whether this optional status is present or not. It is handling right. If it's present, then it is getting that. So there are a few conditions. See, if it is, we are assigning some values to null, and we are getting this pageable thing from the parameter and passing to here and get some data here. So there are many operations that we do inside this method. Many checks we do inside this API. This is a typical API actually, uh, to return the data according to the input condition. These parameters are input conditions. Right? So what I mean to say is, like, as a unit tester, what I will do, I will test this particular parameter optional status with many things. I will give a null here. I will give some unwanted value here, illegal value here. I will give a proper value here. In all the case, our API should handle all these things properly. So there may be some thousands of API in our system. You cannot do everything manually, right? To automate this, JUnit came into picture. Uh, Here also we have this JUnit implemented. Probably show. See, it is a typical JUnit framework actually. Or they will inject as a service. I'll show it. See, you can see it is before, right? At before the annotation, right? It comes from org.junit, right? They will execute something. See, at test and all they have given. Right? So we'll come to this at before and at test in a short. So what this will do, it will we saw some methods here, right? It will call this method through some fake data. See, they have created some fake number here, dummy data they have created, and they have called this method, and they are testing the response, right? Like, see, they have created how many number of test data here. So now what this, if we execute this JUnit test, what it will do, it will have this dummy data. Instead of hitting an API from Postman or those kind of thing, or from a front end app, we are simulating the data from the backend itself using this faker kind of thing, and we are hitting this API or this hitting this method by passing this value as an argument. Now we are validating against the result. For this valid result, valid argument, what result it should throw, we are validating. For illegal result, what it should throw, we are also validating that. You got some basic idea, right? Why we use JUnit. Even in our backend project, we use JUnit as a unit testing framework. This is used by developers actually. JUnit is a very, very popular one. Getting it right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what our testing, community did, they saw this usefulness of JUnit, and they wanted to mimic this to the testing world. Right? So only came the TestNG thing. But with additional few capabilities to the JUnit, they have added additional capabilities to the TestNG so that it to make it compatible for test-driven development. We have two main concepts, right? TDD and BDD. See, yesterday we saw we can read the Excel sheet and we can directly simulate those methods without needing anything, without needing a JUnit or Cucumber. TDID very popular framework is Test Engine, BDD very popular framework is Cucumber, right? So without needing these frameworks, we are able to achieve the test. But what's the use of this TestNG or Cucumber framework? Can anyone say? Why we need a you testing framework or test-driven framework like TestNG or Cucumber? Okay, the answer is it gives a proper structure and mapping to our particular test case, and it also helps us to generate some results very easily. Results part we know, even TestNG gives results whether the test is passed or failed. But what about that mapping part? Mapping and results, right? Results or reports. So the mapping is, so we saw this XML file, right? Actually, we have, sorry, XLS file. We read this XLS file, input.xls, and let me open that. To drive the what to say keywords or methods, we use this sheet. To drive the data, we use this sheet. But we wanted to configure everything here only, right? We wanted to give every methods here only. We might miss some, we might not know some, and there might be some reusability problems also. There might be some, how will you how are you going to map this particular methods to a given test case? For example, uh, what we are doing is like we are doing something like this, right? In our main method, so we are invoking this particular method through reflections, right? For example, what if we have many classes like this which contains many methods? How will you know the particular method that you're trying to invoke is in which class? For example, we know it's a single class in this particular project that we have created. We know that these methods reside in this particular class only. But what if there are some 100 classes, 200 classes that are containing various methods? How we will know which method to execute? Every time we have to create this objects for 100 classes here, and using reflection search for 100 classes, and if the class method name matches, it is a wrong kind of implementation, right? We don't want that, right? So TestNG, you can say, gives kind of a mapping to our test case and which file we want to execute. It makes our life simpler. We'll see some examples with regarding to that. And it also gives us flexibility to do many things, right? We have these annotations. TestNG is famous for these annotations, right? Mapping thing is kind of mapping the file to which test case we wanted to execute. And we have this annotations kind of thing, which is very powerful to execute this particular TestNG thing. Right? We'll see these annotations shortly. So uh, the one area which see, we know how to create our classes, right? We just say right click and create new class and all. So we know to create interface, we know to create abstract class and all, but we can also create annotations, as you can see like this. It is a special kind of class. I'll just show you one small annotation. So if you give my annotation, click on finish. See, have you seen something like this actually? Anyone at interface and my annotation?
No, Karthik.
Okay.
Myself.
So if you do something like this, what you can do is like you can use something like this. You can annotate your class, you can annotate your methods, and this annotation can be intercepted by the logic that you write in the code. You can pass the parameters to this annotation, and you can write some logic here inside this annotation class itself to do certain things, to validate certain things given the parameter. Or there are some other concepts called aspect oriented programming, AOP. The entire TestNG or JNet framework works in this concept called aspect oriented programming. What I mean by aspect is like we annotate these methods through these various annotations. We have right at before, at after, and before class, after class, before method, I'm not sure. I'll just see the annotations. Right, we have this TestNG annotation.
Karthik?
Huh?
Before and after it's before test and after test.
Yeah, right. Before test and after test.
I think it's
Yeah,
before and after JUnit.
Yeah. So before method, after method, we have before class and after class we have. So we have these annotations, right? So what these annotations do in the background, we also wanted to know that, right? So any method that is annotated, any method that is annotated with any one of these, what it will do, it will try to find whether the method is annotated or not using reflections. We saw the reflections recently. So if I am annotating this method, before executing this method, it will try to find whether this method is annotated or not. And if it is annotated, it will try to find what is that annotation, whether it is before class or before test, after test, anything. It will try to find. And if it is before test, then obviously the framework is designed in such a way that the particular method has to be executed before every test. Okay? Now it will maintain certain order. It will scan the entire project. It will maintain certain order in our RAM to execute. So we know the order, right? Before, so at test will be executed finally after all the before. So before the entire class is executed, this before class will be executed. Before the entire test is executed, before test is executed. Before this test is executed, so it maintains some certain order in a data structure in our RAM. And this order is mapped to the particular methods. Now, since it is scanning the entire project and storing this in RAM, and our TestNG framework will know, hey, this is how I'm going to execute the particular methods in this order only, because I have scanned this entire methods in our entire project, and I know which method is annotated with which annotations, and I have to execute this particular methods in this order only, like that. The particular TestNG, if the particular framework is there, it will know. And this is called aspect-oriented programming, or AOP. So you're giving an aspect to a particular project. Like this is how you want to execute. I don't want to execute in a sequentially how we do in our typical Java program. So this particular TestNG class might or might not be executed with the help of a main method. I'll come to what is that. So we can have a test suite itself. It's not like we should run like we have this entire set of attest annotations, right? Before all the attest annotation that is there, if you wanted to run certain code, you use that before suite. After all the test is run, we use that after speed, and we can segregate this particular test as classes, right? For example, this is one class that we have created. These are two methods that we are intending to launch. So this is one particular class where we can annotate this particular method with a test, right? This is a test ng attest annotation, right? So if this particular class is executed, and if we wanted to do some certain operation before this test methods in this class are executed, we can use this before class and after class things. After class executes the thing after all the tests in the particular class is executed. Before test and after test is very famous, we know, right? After every before test, it will execute this before test annotation whatever method that is there. That is, I mean, whatever method that is annotated with the before test, it will be executed. Same goes for after test. And we can group this particular test also. So while we group this test, we can execute this before group after group thing also. And we have this before method and after method thing to execute after each and every method, test method. And we have this data provider. It is not that much useful nowadays. We'll just see what it is to supply the data for the test at the runtime. So we have this at factory. So like it gives some certain useful functionalities at the time of running the test ng suite to return the object directly. We'll see what it is also. We have listeners. Listeners is something which is used to listen to events that are fired at the time of testing. So if certain event happens, we should do, we can configure in the listeners. And we have these parameters to pass to test to the method which are annotated with the attest annotation. We have this attest itself to run the test actually, right? So nowadays, what is happening is like people are trying to move away from TestNG and go to Cucumber, because one major advantage of Cucumber is like since it is providing the descriptive kind of way of testing your applications. So generating report from that is very easy, and setting up an automation framework with Cucumber is very easy when compared to Java. I mean TestNG thing. I'll show why. We will know when we start to do the code. We'll know why it is actually. So what I'll do, okay. And this data table set, everything is there. I'll actually annotate this particular thing with that test. So one thing to know about this Cucumber is like, I'm sorry, TestNG is like, so this attest is there in this particular class. It can be executed in any order. Order is not in our control generally. So if we don't give any annotation, any proper parameters inside this attest annotation, this can be executed in any order. So we don't want that, right? This order should be always launch the browser and go to this input selection. That's the order, right? If this method is called before this method, browser itself will not be launched, right? So we can set the priority. See, if you see the options for this, there are so many options actually, right? Right, you can set the priority here. I'm setting the priority 0, and okay, sir. And here I'm setting the priority 1. So number which is always less will take the higher precedence. So now we have ensured that this particular test will be run in this order only, like that. Right? We'll try to execute this. So okay, before that, there are things which we wanted to know. See, even Eclipse and even if you use IntelliJ, it provides something called plugins, right? You can go and use these plugins actually. Uh, in Eclipse, if you use, there is something called Eclipse Marketplace. Right? So you can, I have already installed this TestNG plugin. The same kind of plugin is available for, I mean, IntelliJ also. So you have just install this plugin in your Eclipse or IntelliJ, wherever you're trying to use this. So what that plugin does is like, it will it will know whether the particular class we are trying to execute is TestNG class or not, or TestNG annotated test class or not. So, we saw some options when we try to run the class. There was some option to run as a TestNG test, right? So these are options which are provided by this particular add-on that we have installed in our Eclipse. And there are some options to convert certain project to a TestNG project also. So, like for example, if I want to convert this entire project in TestNG, then I can go here TestNG. This particular TestNG came here because of that add-on only, the plugin only. I can convert this entire thing to a TestNG class. So converting it will ask, hey, I want to create this testng.xml. So where do you want to create? Like, what name do you want to create and all? So I will come to this XML file little later, but understand that these are the capabilities that are provided by this particular plugin itself, so that it makes our life easier to deal with the test engine. And before moving on, we have to add this testng dependency also in our pom.xml. So if you go to this testng maven dependency, recent versions are also released. You can use the latest one. So we have to copy this and use this particular dependency also. See, the plugin is just to make our life easier inside our Eclipse, but without this dependency, testng things will not work. I'm getting the whole point. So I installed the dependency also. So only this attest annotation we are able to use here. So we'll try to run this. So okay, now our test is running, right? Now you can see it gave some basic report to us, right? So we have annotated two methods using attest. So launch browser is annotated with that test, it is passed. Input selection is annotated with that test, that is also passed. It gives some basic result, like, okay, I have run two things, there are 0 failures and 0 skips like that. So now if we have some hundreds of attest cases, we'll know like what particular method went wrong and all. It will also provide us a stack trace. Where was the problem? Why our test has to be abruptly stopped actually like that. So we'll try to use some of the methods here. Some of the annotation, try to see what happens actually. We'll use that before test. And we'll try to use this adapter test also. and we'll try to print something in our test methods also, so that we'll know the order of execution. We'll try to run this. So because of this plugin only, our Eclipse now knows, hey, this is a TestNG class. So I don't want to give the option as run as Java application. This is a TestNG. So now I have to run as a TestNG test. Okay. So if you see this, we have annotated this add before, right? This is add before test annotator method. So it is executed before the actual test is launched. So now the browser is launched. This is launch browser method is called, and this input selection method is called, and this at after test method is called after this, right? So now we know the order of execution. So before test, this at before test method is executed, and this launch browser method is executed. Input selection method is executed, and now at after test method is executed, right? We'll try to do a before method thing. I'll try to run this. Okay. So now what this add before and after method does, see, add test is called before all the test. This add before method is called before this particular method is launched. This launch browser is actually a method, right? Now this actually launch browser is called browser is launched, some logs are printed, and after method is called for this launch browser thing, and before method is called for this second method, actually input selection method. So after calling this before method, that particular method only, annotated method only, then input selection is called, right? Then only after method is called again, and after test is called again. Now we know the order of execution, right? Right. So this can be useful in many ways, right? These priorities, how this is setting. Can anyone say, like, think and say of an example where this can be useful? Why we have to call certain things before certain things are executed? Why have to call certain things after certain things are executed? Why we have to have a framework like this actually?
To see, we have the multiple test cases, right? When we are running the multiple test cases, somewhere we would be needing uh, assuming the initiation of browser. Okay,
Okay.
so it's good that you use that, and the cache would be easy also. It helps in you speed your process.
Okay. So launching the browser is typical example of needing this kind of thing, right? There may be some hundreds of test suites that are available in our testng.xml.
Yeah, so
Uh,
yeah, it's kind of multiple when you're trying to handle the multiple test cases. So it's good to have this kind of implementation where we will be initiating it, like, so every time you need to run the browser, right? Otherwise, it get overlapped. Assuming you already initiated the instance of one Chrome driver, and you're trying to implement the second test case with other inputs, so it would be overloaded, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's a typical example of why we need this kind of annotations. So if we have launched the browser previously only using some mud before annotated methods in those methods, we don't want to launch this browser again and again for all the test cases that we are going to run. Simple implementation that is very effective also. Second useful thing is, like, what if we have some preloaded data that should be available for the test case to be executed? For example, uh, let's say I have one thing here. Actually, let's say I have a string data, not data, string, let's say something random thing, vehicle, right? Let's say leave the vehicle, string email ID. So let's say I have some kind of data like this, which is fetched from database or from API or from anywhere. What if this particular email ID has to be initiated differently for this method and this method? But it has, we know this compulsorily, this email ID thing is going to be initiated for all the methods. But if we wanted to do it differently for each and everything, assign different value or some sort of, so we can have it as a global variable here. And while launching, before launching this method, I mean, before launching this test case, if we are setting this particular thing here, a particular value of the particular string value here, email ID here, before each test case, it will be useful, right? This is a very, very what to say, simple or vague example which I'm giving. But assume that you are handling a very large project and we wanted to load a huge set of data before the particular method or test has to be executed. Now, this data has to be used. Data is going to be used by this test or this method. But we know definitely for sure this data has to be loaded for each and every test, right? With different criteria. We don't want that logic clustered in our core logic for test that we write here, right? So what if we have this data handling logic in this kind of methods as well, before and after method? It is easy to segregate separation of concerns, right? The data handling is in separate method and your actual core logic in separate method. And if you wanted to what to say, maintain this particular method, you wanted to change something here, it is also very, very easy. You just don't have to go to each and every test to change the thing. You just have something centralized and just to go there and change the things, then it will actually work. That is also one use case, right? We have, okay, I'll show this actually. In our test automation project also, we used this at before and those things primarily for these purposes also. Okay. Okay, I don't know where that went. Maybe I'll try to. Okay, I'll try to show some other project.
I think it's a JavaScript.
No, no, it is actually Ruby.
Ruby.
Okay. Okay. So this is a typical example. So we have, this is actually a BG framework. Concept is the same actually. So what we are trying to do is like, we know before all this is equal to this at before class method, right? Before all the things that we wanted to execute here, we wanted to load certain things here. So this is the actual test case here. I'll show where is the test case. This it thing is there, right? This is the actual test case. Assume that this is the method that is annotated with at test actually, right? So what is at before all does is like, before executing each and every test case, it loads certain things, right? We need some dependent objects and all. So it loads everything here by creating the new instance of the particular objects and all. And before each thing, see, we have set a certain thing, right? We are refreshing the browser and we are we are assigning some email value, a sender email, by giving some timestamp at the particular time and first name. So after all the test is executed, we are quitting the browser, right? So to load a certain dependent classes like this, dependent libraries like this, uh, and and generate some test data that is used to for each and every test case. In those scenarios also, this kind of hooks is very helpful, right? I mean, these are the main scenarios where you will be using this annotation section. These are hooks, right? So primarily to do certain process like launching the browser or generating test reports, and to load the data for each and every test that we are going to do at the runtime. So these are the two primary purposes that we wanted to use the kind of these hooks annotations uh, that we are going to drive forward test. Okay, so these are the major things. But what if we wanted to drive this particular thing from our main method itself? So that is also possible. We don't wanted to invoke this particular things using reflections now. We don't want to explicitly use this what to say, keyword driven framework. Instead, I'll just comment this out. We'll comment this entire thing out. So what this particular things, let's assume that we are reading some data from Excel. I'm just going to hard code this now. Let's assume that we are going to read some data from the Excel. Let's give that an object, a string case. Okay, case is a keyword. Case, let's say, test case. See, this is the particular class that we wanted to execute. These are the class which are annotated with this testng annotations. This is the class that we wanted to execute now, right? So what we will do, we'll copy this particular class name. We'll put it in the driver actually. So if you wanted to do something from the main method, knowing the class name is also, I mean, generally, if you wanted to use certain class, knowing the class name is not going to be sufficient. You have to know the fully qualified name. You know what's the fully qualified name, anyone? See, we know this particular class name is driver Excel, but what's the fully qualified name for this particular class actually? What's the qualified name?
It's with including the package name.
Yeah, includes the packaging, right? So this class can be anywhere, and there can be multiple classes with the same name in different packages. So Java will expect to give a fully qualified name to drive these classes. So this particular driver is Excel method where we have this attesting annotations. Its fully qualified name is this keyword driven, this package name dot this particular class name, right? So we'll give that the exact word. So now we know this is the class where the test cases or test annotation that we are going to do is there. We just got this as a string, but we wanted to convert this as a class, actual class, to pass to a testng to be able to execute this. So we saw in our reflections, we have this class itself. Okay. This class is provided in the java.lang.package, right? We have the class named class itself. So let's say, so to convert this particular string to a class, we have some name, I mean some method called for name actually, right? This for name you would have saw when you have done this JDBC connection actually. Anyone use this JDBC, Java database connectivity APIs to connect to databases using Java codes?
No.
Okay. Okay, you have this many drivers, right? MySQL driver, Oracle SQL driver. So our particular JDBC API should know like which driver you wanted to use, right? So we have to give this fully qualified class name as an input. So we use class.forName there, class.forName, MySQL.driver, and those things. You know, we will give. Just try to. I'll just maybe I'll show that example. Nowadays, it's not compulsory to use this. Defaultly, our driver itself will be doing that. But generally, we have this thing. See, something like this we'll do. So we add this dependency to JDBC MySQL dependency to our pom.xml. And if you wanted to use that MySQL driver, you have to do something like this. Class.forName of com.mysql.jdbc is the package name, and driver is that particular MySQL driver class name. You have to do something like this. Then only you can create a connection, get connection like this, and you can create a statement, you can create a query, and you can execute this JDBC. And try to do this by your own. This JDBC thing, it's kind of very fun and very useful. Okay, so now we have converted this particular string to a class name itself. We'll try to print this actually. So we have this reflection things, right? Sorry. So using this reflection, we can get the name of the class at the runtime. Just print the same name which we are given here. So we'll know for sure, hey, this particular thing is converted to our class itself. Right? Otherwise, it will anyway it will throw an exception if it's not proper. Okay, we'll try to run this first actually. Try to run this. Okay, it's throwing an exception because our package name is not proper. You have seen I missed that n at the end here, right? It will throw an exception actually. Java dot lang dot class not found exception. We'll try to then try to run this. So now it's running successfully, right? Now, if we don't give this proper name, we'll get that exception. We have given the fully qualified name. Now we are printing that name. Then now we know for sure our our string has been converted to actual class itself. Like now we can use this testng provided classes or libraries to execute this particular testng class using our Java code itself. Yeah, this testng class, right? So we can set many things here. So a few basic things that we wanted to set is that we want to set the classes for which we wanted to execute the particular test are there. Right? In our case, our test is there in this driver methods Excel class. So it is expecting as an array, right? If you see this, this argument is as an actual classes array, right? You can see this open close brackets. Now we'll pass this as an array. Our test is our class is test class, right? Now for other basic things, we'll set suite name and those things. Let's say my test suite. Generally, whatever you do in that testng.xml, we can do it here in via Java code itself. And maybe I'll set the default test name on this. Right. Now we have set it some basic things. I'll just say test.run. It is equivalent to running our. It is equivalent to saying, "Hey, right click this and run this. Run as a testng test." It is equivalent to that. Now we are doing everything in a programmatic way. We'll try to run this. Same thing is happening. Right? Browser is launched. The particular data will be given. Submit button is clicked. Details are there. Okay, everything is the same. See, the test is executed successfully. So we have hard coded this. We have hard coded this data, but what if we read this data from the Excel and pass this particular data here? That is also possible, right? If we do that, we don't need this keywords at all because these keywords will be launched from the testng itself. Using that attest annotation, will know, hey, these are the methods that we going to launch. Just replace this particular test case name with a class name actually, right? So if we replace the particular test case 001 with this class name, driver Excel methods, then you read that particular thing from the Excel using this sample code. And if you pass this particular name as a fully qualified name here, convert to a class and execute, you can even use a for loop to read all the classes and put it in a class array to execute. This is an array, right? We have given a single entry here. You can give a number of entries to execute here. It will run all the test classes that we want to execute through Java itself. So this is how we integrate testng suite by running a testng suite through an Excel itself. We don't hard code the classes here. We read the classes or test which we wanted to execute at the while using testng. So we should have some kind of mapping, right, for what test cases we wanted to execute or not. So we have this mapping kind of thing which is provided by our driver class. Mapping is actually the test case name itself, right? So to create that mapping, you have to create this particular test case name using that class name itself. Once you do that, maybe we can have additional capabilities like on another column saying yes or no. If the particular thing is yes, that particular test will be executed. If the thing is no, then the particular test will not be executed. We can have those kind of capabilities also. We can go and extend in future. We'll continue this. I mean, TestNG along with this form.xml. I mean, TestNG.xml example also tomorrow. But this is a basic thing that we will do to run a TestNG test using actual framework. TestNG can be run by simply annotating the test and creating a TestNG XML and say, hey, run as a TestNG XML, run as a TestNG suite. That is also there. It's a manual way of doing things. But if you wanted to create a framework and do things, this is how you do actually. Right? Okay. Anything you wanted to discuss until what are the things that we saw today?
Only the last part, Karthik, where you use the package and those implementation, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's nothing but we are giving the fully qualified name. We understood that, right? We have to give the fully qualified name for the particular uh, class where we have this attest and add before annotations and all. Right? This, but we wanted to convert this particular string to be the actual class itself that we wanted to pass to a TestNG to execute. So we have this reflections package in our Java, right? So we can convert everything into the class itself, provided that the particular class is there in the particular package. We have this class itself. We go here. Okay, yeah, class, right? So this is a kind of special class which is provided by Java to get the properties of the class at the runtime itself, right? If you, yeah, this for name is there, right? If you see, read the description of this for name. Returns the object associated with the class or interface with the given string name. So if you pass this parameter as a string name, which is the class name, it returns the actual class itself. See, return type of this particular for name is class only. Right? So it returns the actual class itself. So only we are able to get this particular driver methods Excel from that actual string to the class itself because it returns as a class. Now we are calling this TestNG libraries to set which classes our test annotations are there and all. It takes an array as an argument, and we know this particular test class that we have written. I mean, which we have got. This contains the test methods we know now. We pass that as one of the data in this array, and we say test.run. So when we say test.run now, it is as equivalent as doing something manually like this. Run, right click, run as testng.test. Instead of doing this manually, we are doing this programmatically like this. Same thing, we are invoking the testng test using programmatic set. Right. So other part which I was saying is like instead of hard coding this class name, what if we have this class name in the Excel, read from the Excel, append the package name before, and the other process are same, right? We can run our testng test using our Excel itself.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Mithun, anything?
No, but clear.
Okay. We continue this testng tomorrow by seeing some example with that form.xml things. I mean, sorry, testng.xml things. and we'll move to Cucumber also. Right? So this is how we, I mean, there are certain frameworks to do certain things, there's been code logics to do certain things, like reading from Excel and those things. So how we integrate together matters. How we integrate together forms the basis of how we create an automation framework itself, right? I hope I was able to give some clarity on this framework kind of thing over this last 4-5 sessions. Anyway, we'll continue tomorrow. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik.